Imagine you're a billionaire. You get a mysterious tip. There's a secret hedge fund run by Ivy League insiders, invite-only, ultra-elite, and generating huge returns. You're intrigued. Everyone wants access. But there's a catch. The fund doesn't advertise. There's no website, no pitch deck, no press, just whispers. If you're lucky enough to get in, you don't ask questions. That's how a man named Mark Bloom, who had zero affiliation with Ivy League schools, got dozens of rich investors to wire him money. He called it the North Hills Fund, told them it was tied to the Ivy League, and used fancy Manhattan office space to seal the illusion. He wore the right suits, dropped the right names, showed just enough returns on doctored statements to keep people hooked. And because the fund claimed to be exclusive and low profile, nobody noticed that it wasn't real. For over a decade, Bloom posed as a legitimate hedge fund manager. Investors were told their money was going into structured finance deals and credit instruments, standard hedge fund lingo. In reality, he was running a Ponzi scheme, paying old investors with new money while siphoning millions into his own accounts. And just like that, the illusion of trust became the perfect cover for one of the most overlooked financial scams of the 2000s. But here's the crazy part. Bloom wasn't just living large. He also used investor money to buy porn companies, including a stake in a hardcore adult film distributor. Not exactly the Ivy League asset class you expected. And still, nobody caught him. Not the investors, not the SEC, until everything fell apart. So how did nobody notice? That's the scariest part. Mark Bloom's scam wasn't some lightning-fast rug pull. It went on for over 10 years. He played the long game, carefully, patiently, quietly. He told investors the North Hills Fund had exclusive access to private equity-style debt deals. Things too sophisticated for the average person to understand, which made them seem even more legit. If you didn't get it, that just meant you weren't smart enough. Classic con. Even basic documents were vague. There were no audited financials, no third-party verifications. But the people investing weren't retail amateurs. These were family offices, lawyers, CEOs, doctors, smart people with money. And still, they didn't ask the right questions. Why? Because Bloom looked the part. He had a swanky Park Avenue address. He talked fast, wore expensive watches, even hosted lavish parties. His image gave the illusion of credibility, and the fake Ivy League link gave him instant prestige. Then came the big lie. Bloom started showing off performance numbers. Fake monthly returns, carefully calibrated to look realistic. Not too good, just good enough. A steady 12%, 15% annual return month after month. Exactly what investors wanted to believe. In truth, there were no investments. It was all a spreadsheet fantasy. Even worse, when one client, a family office representing multiple generations of wealth, asked for a small withdrawal, Bloom scrambled to come up with the cash. That should have been a fire alarm. But he blamed liquidity issues and promised it was a temporary delay. And somehow they bought it. The longer it went, the harder it became for anyone to admit they'd been duped. Admitting they were fooled would be admitting they weren't as smart as they thought. So they stayed in, doubled down. Bloom's biggest asset wasn't his fund, it was investor ego, and he exploited it ruthlessly. But behind the scenes, he wasn't investing. He was wiring money to himself, leasing luxury cars, and funding porn production companies like Arrow Productions, which owned the rights to infamous adult films like Deep Throat. You can't make this stuff up. It all came crashing down in 2023. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. One of Bloom's early investors, a high-net-worth individual who had been asking for redemptions for months, finally lost patience. They brought in forensic accountants, and within days the curtain was pulled back. The shocking discovery? There were no underlying assets, no portfolio, no loans, nothing, just a checking account. With barely enough money to cover a few months of expenses, over $30 million had vanished. What Bloom had done wasn't sophisticated. There were no offshore shell companies or crypto wallets. It was basic fraud, robbing Peter to pay Paul, faking returns, and hoping nobody ever asked for too much at once. But by then, the money was gone. Lavish spending on luxury watches, cars, first-class vacations, massive transfers to his personal accounts. And most bizarre of all, millions routed to Arrow Productions, the vintage adult film company. Bloom had secretly become one of the biggest players in the retro porn industry, using stolen investor funds to bankroll a media empire nobody asked for. And here's the wildest part. When the scheme was exposed, almost nobody covered it. No front-page Wall Street Journal expose, no CNBC special. Just a couple of financial blogs and obscure legal filings. That's it. Why? Because the victims were mostly rich, embarrassed, and quiet. Many didn't want the PR nightmare of admitting they'd been fooled by a guy who spent their retirement on adult film rights and bottle service. The SEC filed civil charges. The DOJ quietly pursued a criminal case, but there were no televised hearings, no perp walks. Just a simple court filing in Manhattan, sealed for ongoing investigation, and then silence. It didn't help that Bloom pled guilty almost immediately. He waived his right to a trial, avoided testimony, and in doing so, buried the names of dozens of high-profile investors who likely preferred to stay anonymous. Bloom was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. But restitution? That's the real joke. Less than $1 million has been recovered, out of over $30 million stolen. The rest? Vaporized. And here's the real kicker. Bloom's name is barely searchable today. Most outlets didn't even publish his mugshot. For one of the largest fund frauds in recent memory, there's a stunning lack of digital footprint. Compare that to Sam Bankman-Fried or Elizabeth Holmes. Those cases were media circuses. This one, it was swept under the rug. Because sometimes the biggest frauds aren't the loudest. They're the ones where the victims have the most to lose by talking. And in this case, they chose silence. Let's be honest, Brian Bloom wasn't some criminal mastermind. He didn't have a PhD in finance. He wasn't moving money through Cayman shell companies or hacking Wall Street. He was just confident. Confident enough to lie on investor calls. Confident enough to print fake statements. Confident enough to talk his way into rooms with ultra-wealthy people and convince them he was managing millions, when really, he had nothing. So how does a guy like that pull off a $30 million fraud? Simple. He knew who not to target. Bloom didn't pitch the public. No flashy ads. No Robinhood users. No billboards in Times Square. He targeted private wealth, family offices, small funds, rich dentists, and mid-tier hedge fund guys who didn't ask too many questions. These weren't retail investors protected by regulation. They were sophisticated investors, which ironically means they get less protection, not more. That's the loophole. Once you're raising money from accredited investors, you don't have to register with the SEC the same way. No public disclosures, no audits, no watchdogs looking over your shoulder. It's the Wild West of finance, and people like Bloom know exactly how to exploit it. And here's the twisted part. The bigger the check size, the less people seem to ask. Everyone wants to believe they're in on the secret, that they found a hidden gem, that they're smarter than the market. Bloom leaned into that. He promised asymmetric returns, used fancy jargon, claimed he was doing off-market real estate deals, mezzanine debt, and private lending. None of it existed, but nobody verified, because verifying means due diligence. And due diligence means time, lawyers, fees, all the things rich people hate when they think they've found a shortcut to high returns. So the cycle repeats. A confident guy, a vague pitch, a few million raised, some fake returns to build momentum. Then more investors, more lies, more money, until one person pulls their cash and the whole thing collapses. But by then the scammer's already rich. The victims are too embarrassed to talk. And prosecutors? They don't always see it as a priority, especially if nobody's screaming in the press. That's what makes scams like Bloom so dangerous. They don't go viral. They don't trend. They just bleed people quietly. And once they're over, there's no justice tour. No Netflix doc. Just a sealed court file and a few whispers at a country club. And while Bloom sits in prison, probably playing tennis and reading business books, someone else is doing the same thing right now. Same playbook, same confidence, same victims. Because in private finance, the real danger isn't volatility. It's trust. And trust is the one thing every good scammer knows how to fake. Brian Bloom didn't run a billion-dollar Ponzi scheme. He didn't crash a bank or start a fake crypto exchange. He stole just enough to go unnoticed, but enough to ruin dozens of lives. And that's exactly why his story matters. Because these are the scams we don't talk about. The ones too boring for documentaries, too technical for the nightly news, too niche for Twitter outrage. But they happen every day, in small cities, in family offices, in private DMs between friends of friends who just want their money to work harder. They're not run by evil geniuses. They're run by smooth talkers with a nice watch and an answer for everything. And the scary part? The system is built to let them thrive. When someone like Brian Bloom says he's investing in real estate or private credit, most people don't even know what to ask. It sounds legit. It feels exclusive. It fits the fantasy of easy wealth without all the Wall Street noise. That's what makes it work. There's no due diligence checklist for trust. No red flashing light when a guy says, "I'm returning 15% annually, net of fees." In fact, the smarter the investor, the more likely they are to believe it, because they don't want to admit they got played. Brian Bloom wasn't just scamming for money. He was selling a story, one his investors wanted to believe. And once they were in, they stayed in, even when things felt off, even when the numbers didn't quite add up, because calling it out would mean admitting failure, admitting weakness. So they stayed quiet, and Bloom got bolder, until one day the lie was too big to hide. The money was gone, the emails stopped, and the investors were left with nothing but an empty LLC and a tax headache. That's the tragedy of white-collar fraud. It's not loud, it's not obvious. It's slow erosion, until one day the floor gives out, and it's too late. Bloom got caught, sentenced. His story made a few headlines, but next month someone else will try the same thing, and someone else will believe them. Because the problem isn't just the scammers, it's the culture that rewards confidence over clarity, that glorifies returns without asking questions, that assumes wealth equals wisdom. And until that changes, the scams won't stop. They'll just get slicker, quieter, closer to home. So next time someone promises the inside track, the special deal, the secret strategy that only a few people know about, ask questions. And then ask 5 more. Because the real cost of trust isn't just money. It's time, reputation, sanity. And once it's gone, you don't get it back. This is Midnight Watch. Subscribe if you want more real stories about wealth, power, and the scams hiding in plain sight. See you in the next one.